Hello Horror Hounds, we continue our journey through the films of Dario Argento with 2001's Sleepless, a film which many fans consider to be a return to form for Dario. I suspect there's a selection of his fans who would be happy for him to just churn out gory giallo movies time and time again, regardless of quality. Rightly or wrongly, I hold the maestro to a higher standard. So this is the bit where I make a ham-fisted joke about Sleepless being a great cure for insomnia. Police in Turin are investigating a double murder that seems to have links to a serial killer called the Dwarf Murderer from 17 years ago. However, the Dwarf Murderer, Vincenzo De Fabritis, is dead, his body having been pulled out of the river back in 1983. The police ask for the advice of Ulysses Moretti, the now retired police inspector who investigated the original murders. Moretti teams up with Giacomo Gallo, who witnessed his mother's murder as a child in 1983 at the hands of the Dwarf Murderer, but never saw the killer's face. Is the Dwarf Murderer really dead, or was the wrong man accused 17 years ago? We've seen Dario Argento return to the well, return to the giallo format on numerous occasions before, anytime he's taken a critical mauling, as he did with The Phantom of the Opera. Hold your nose when you say the name of that film. One could argue that Argento's been remixing The Bird with the Crystal Plumage his entire career, but each giallo entry up until now has added something new to the mix. Sleepless is his first giallo entry that feels a little tired, a little played out, self-consciously trying to capture past magic rather than creating magic of its own. So many aspects from Sleepless are replays of things we've seen before. Let me go through a list I concocted off the top of my head after rewatching this a couple of nights ago. The odd couple team-up of Moretti and Giacomo is straight out of Cat o' Nine Tails. The killer writing about his obsessions is from Tenebrae. A victim having their teeth bashed in is from Profondo Rosso. The cut-out animals that the killer leaves as a signature from his murders speak to the cut-out daisy chain of people that features very briefly in Inferno. Extreme close-ups of the killer popping pills is from Opera. The nursery rhyme found in an old book here speaks to the Book of Urban Ghost Stories about the ghost of the weeping child. That's a key clue in Profondo Rosso. The killer's deranged speech at the end echoes exactly the same thing from the ending of Four Flies on Grey Velvet. The drowning of one victim speaks again Profondo Rosso, the killing by drowning in there. And Inspector Moretti's end, cornered in a dark room with the killer somewhere roundabout and then being approached by a pint-sized automaton, a little miniature-sized puppet. Again, it makes you think of nothing but Profondo Rosso, Deep Red. It's hard to argue that this is some kind of postmodernist metatextual reference to his previous works, when the modern era of slashers at this point had already given us 3 Scream movies which set the bar at metatextual post-referencing. This reeks, I'm sad to say, of lazy rehashing. It feels like this is a film made by an Argento covers band. Those looking for a good mystery with Sleepless will be left frustrated. Anyone simply looking for a succession of gory murders will likely be satisfied, but they themselves will probably be frustrated with the amount of downtime in between those kill scenes. Honestly, films with a succession of gory and inventive kills are 10 a penny. With Argento, one expects something more, a little cut above the rest. That said, if you come for gore, the splatter is exceptional. This film has two MVPs, most valuable players, and the first is Sergio Stiviletto, providing the special effects as he has done in previous movies for Dario and as he will do in future movies. The animatronic heads that he creates, complete with eye movements, mouth and tongue movements, and a detail you don't often see with animatronic heads. Gloop, saliva, the eyes are wet, saliva comes out of the mouths, just giving it just that extra little touch of realism. So when the killer is really going at one of these dummy heads and it's jerking backwards and forwards and the eyes are going and saliva's coming out of the mouth, sometimes you recoil the violence and brutality that is seemingly done to a real person's face is horrific and a wonderful magic trick to behold. Us horror fans who like our gore love the trick of it, love the illusion of it, and Sergio Stiviletto here really ups his game. The second MVP, as you would expect, is Max von Sydow, the film's secret weapon, affording Sleepless really a credibility that it doesn't deserve. Von Sydow gives a characteristically thoughtful and dignified performance, despite the fact that Moretti's dementia is really sketchily provided for by the script he's working from. The only other performances that really find any purchase are all from the more mature members of the cast. Rosella Frank as Vincenzo de Fabriti's mother, the suspected dwarf murderer, in the great tradition of murder mysteries, blurs the lines of that character between possible witness or possible suspect. Paolo Maria Scalondro as Chief Inspector Manny, the cop in charge of the modern day investigation, is played with gruff annoyance at Moretti's meddling in his case. The younger actors don't fare as well. Stefano Dionisi, the now adult Giacomo, only makes an impression due to his uncanny similarity to a young Argento, and Giacomo's group of friends are all fodder, lacking all subtlety, even to the point that you'll identify the killer the moment they appear on screen. One thing Argento has not lost his knack for is his use of locations. He can shoot the hell out of a city. He can show us the culture and tradition of a place in films like the Stendhal Syndrome, or in Tenebrae he can completely reposition a city as seemingly familiar in film as Rome and present something new and fresh, a side of a city that we've never seen before. Turin in Sleepless gets the Argento treatment, and his eye for architecture, interiors, streets and alleyways is as keen as it ever was. Part of this murder mystery revolves around a children's nursery rhyme. The dwarf character Vincenzo used to write crime thrillers in a nod to the Italian pulp crime books with yellow covers that inspired the giallo film tradition. From this character comes the nursery rhyme, which forms the framework of the killer's MO. In real life, by the way, the nursery rhyme was written by the delightful Dario Argento. Having to adhere to this nursery rhyme is no equivalent of John Doe's 7 Deadly Sins from Seven. I blame the success of Seven for a glut of killers with a gimmick flicks, and surely by 2001 this whole thing is completely played out. The rhyme concerns a farmer who cannot get to sleep because of the noises his animals are making. He kills them one by one and then goes back to bed. It's the only concession the film makes to its own title. It also straitjackets the killer into not only having to choose animal appropriate victims, but also into having to dispatch them in a manner congruous with the rhyme. It means visiting a nightclub called Zoo, where all the dancers are dressed like various animals. Then we scrape the bottom of the victim barrel by having the rabbit victim be a lady with some large front teeth, whilst the final animal, a swan, coincides happily with the hero's girlfriend performing a recital of music from Swan Lake, dressed as a swan. It adds a touch of the bizarre giallo flair, but I can't help but thinking that a bit of brainstorming could have come up with a slightly less contrived signature for the killer. The film suffers from what seems to be a case of laziness. In some ways, the opening murder scene on the train is classic Argento. The tension is high, the music from Goblin adds a pounding urgency, the outcome is predictably bloody. But with such a self-contained location, it's impossible not to scratch your head when you watch it at the number of times that the killer must have to teleport either in front of or behind the victim to get where they need to be. After the opening 30 minutes, both Argento and Goblin seem to give up the ghost and run out of steam. The rest of the film is a bit of a slog until we reach the explosive finale, and another nod to Sergio Stiviletto there, one of the best exploding head gunshot effects I've ever seen, if not the best. Ironically, the film picks up its pace again during the end credits, when we're treated to a speedily cut, urgent montage of police arriving and dealing with the aftermath of an exceedingly bloody crime scene. I don't know why, but I am a sucker for films that play out a coda under the end credits as they roll. I think in an effort to harken back to past films, there are too many aspects to Sleepless, and at 116 minutes it shows. There is a pared back, decent mystery killer thriller in there. There's a film to be made about an elderly detective with dementia struggling to remember details of a cold case in order to try and solve it. The trouble is that film's now been made and it's called Mr. Holmes. The more I thought about it, fueled by images of Donald Sutherland chasing a diminutive figure through the back streets of Venice in Don't Look Now, and David Cronenberg's pint-sized killers from The Brood, the more I felt that the dwarf murders, the original investigation, and the reveal of the killer in 1983 would have made a more solid and more shocking flick than returning to the story 17 years later did. Next up, we'll be looking at The Card Player, a film that I saw for the first time last night that has been routinely trashed, so I never felt any urgency to visit it. But we'll leave that till next time.